Welcome everyone back, as Julie said, for week 5 of our class, the Omer period, traveling through space, time, and soul. So just as is our custom every week, for a quick recap, and you've probably noticed, if you've been here for the past classes, these keep getting longer. Well, we began by learning about the biblical and agricultural roots of the Omer offering after the first day of Passover, as well as the practice of counting 49 days until the next holiday of Shavuot. We then learned how, following the destruction of the temple, the rabbis continued this mitzvah of counting the days and connected it with the original barley offering by referring to the practice as Sefirat HaOmer. Remember, the barley offering was an Omer of barley. So initially there were these two practices, the Omer offering, which was the barley offering after the first day of Passover, and then the mitzvah of counting the 7 by 7 weeks until the next agricultural offering of Shavuot, which originally had, at least in the Torah itself, had nothing to do with the revelation of Torah at Mount Sinai, but again was another agricultural offering. Remember the grain cycle moving from matzah in Pesach to barley for the Omer offering, and then to the leavened loaves of Shavuot. So following the destruction of the temple, the rabbis kind of collapsed those mitzvot, the Omer offering and the counting of the days, into what we now have as the practice Sefirat HaOmer. We then learned how the Kabbalists jumped into the fray and overlaid the map of this Sephirotic tree onto the period of 49 days, particularly the 7 lower Sefirot. We've discussed the reasoning behind focusing exclusively on the 7 lower Sefirot rather than all 10 of the Sefirot. Onto the period, and so they mapped the Sephirotic tree onto the 49 days of the Omer counting, turning the purely chronological counting into a journey through the inner dimensions of creation and consciousness, as we've discussed. We then began learning about each of the individual Sefirot week by week, beginning with Chesed, the love that loves to love. We then ventured forth into the multi-dimensional terrains of space, time, and soul present in the poetics of the practice of counting the Omer. We are mythically traveling through the Midbar, the wilderness. That's the space of the Omer. We are journeying from Passover, liberation, to Shavuot, revelation. That's the process in time. And the topography of soul is provided by the Sephirotic tree. And then we acknowledged, so in the second week, we explored those 3 dimensions of space, time, and soul as they're present in the practice of Sefirat HaOmer. And we also acknowledged that the act of counting the day, counting the Omer itself, is an expression of Gevura, which is necessary to navigate the howling wilderness of life and evolve one's ability to receive and respond to revelation. We then explored the balancing act of Tiferet, the middle pillar sphera that balances the expansive love giving energy of Chesed and the constricting, boundary defining energy of Gevura. So we explored the balance provided or achieved in the sphera of Tiferet, and we did that also primarily by through the lens of the Akedah, in which both Abraham and Yitzhak were shocked back into an awareness of the gift of life, according to the strange read that we applied to it. We then explored the nuances of Netzach, along with the various paradigms and practices of mourning adhered to during the Omer period through the story of the deaths of Rabbi Akiba's 24,000 students. And now, that brings us through the first 4 classes and the first 4 Sefirot. And now here we are on the 5th class on this, as Julie said, very special night for the week of Hod, the 5th Sefirah, starting from Chesed and the 7 lower Sefirot. And this is a special day in the whole course of the 49 days of the Omer. And it is a bit of a holiday. It is referred to, it is called Lag BaOmer. Lag, for those who don't know, is Lamed Gimel. Lamed equals 30, Gimel equals 3. So it is that day of the Omer, the day after the 32nd day of the Omer. And it's a bit of a holiday, a day of immense celebration, following a period of mourning. It's customary for many people, especially in Israel, to light enormous bonfires. And it's a pilgrimage holiday where graves of the tzaddikim and saintly holy ones, characters from and ancestors from our past, are visited. And there's a lot of stuff associated with it that we will now dive into at a disorienting speed. and we're gonna charge forth. So here we are on the day after the 32nd day of the Omer. So what's the big deal? What are we celebrating? First off, there are many answers to that question. I'm going to open by bringing forth 2 opinions of what this day is about. And they're a bit paradoxical, and they set up a bit of a dialectic that we're going to continue to explore. We opened it up last week, and we're going to, in the way that we kind of we opened up with Chesed and continued learning about Chesed in the week of Gevura, as the 2 are a dialectic pair, and you can really only understand one through the mirror of the other. Netzach and Hod are similar. So we're going to continue with some of the narrative and the ideas that we opened up last week with Netzach, and even some of the stories and characters that we introduced last week as we journey forth into the Sefirat of Hod. So one tradition is that what we are celebrating on this night of the period of the Omer is the cessation of the plague that was killing Rabbi Akiba's 24,000 students. And remember, we learned about what that plague was. Minority opinion was croup, but we explored the kind of psycho-behavioral relational plague that was rampant through the school of Rabbi Akiba and the top rabbinic sages of the time. That led to the death of 12,000 pairs of students, or 24,000 students. So this day is the day that the dying stopped. So that's what we're celebrating, is kind of like the cessation of this plague. The other opinion is that we are actually celebrating the death of another sage, Rabbi Shimon bar Yohai, who we introduced briefly last week as being one of the 5 students that Rabbi Akiba took on after the death of the 24,000 students. So which one is it? Are we celebrating the end of dying, or are we celebrating someone's death? Why would we celebrate a death? And what are we celebrating the death of? These are just some initial questions that I'll throw out there that are going to provide some direction as we go careening through way too much material in too short of a time. So just to refresh again from last week, what was the plague that was rampant throughout Rabbi Akiba's school of students? So Just in case there's anybody new here tonight, or just to refresh people's memory from last week, we will just dive through this very quickly. Rabbi Akiba was one of the greatest sages of his generation. He had 12,000 pairs of students, or 24,000 students. His cardinal teaching was to love your neighbor as yourself, which is quite ironic considering the fact that in the Talmud, it says that during this period of the Omer, 24,000 of his students died because they did not treat each other with respect. They did not treat each other with kavod. This we explored last week in nuance and depth. But suffice it to say, we'll just bring the kind of traditional understanding that explains a bit about what was going on there, which is that a common explanation of that, how could these exalted Torah scholars not be such schmucks, basically, that they're treating each other so poorly that it kills them? So many people will say, in fact, they loved each other so deeply that they couldn't that they couldn't stand to see their chavruta and their friend in Torah and in spirit misunderstand Rabbi Akiba's teachings, or the correct application and halacha of the Torah. So for sure, these were all brilliant students, and yet they were so convinced of their own interpretation of Torah and truth that basically they would continually critique each other in a way that was beyond disrespectful, as if they couldn't tolerate any understanding other than the one that they had arrived at. So many people will explain this away and say, it was this expression, it came from a place of love. They loved each other so much. They had the good news. They were spreading the good news that they had arrived at. It was this strong expression of love to the point where they kind of like suffocated and disrespected the other, and that led to their demise. We kind of deconstructed last week what kind of, if that actually really is love, that idea that doesn't respect the other's perspective and doesn't respect them enough to accept the fact that they might have just come to a different perspective, and actually to be open to hearing what that is, rather than saying, I love you, so you got to see the world my way. That answer, that this is an expression of such deep love on the part of these Torah students, for me is not satisfying, and it forced us into a corner of actually kind of analyzing if that actually was real love, or if that was some other kind of shadow dimension that one might confuse for love. But on Lag BaOmer tonight, the day after the 32nd day of the Omer, these students stopped dying. And we also learned last week that because one of the things that we were in mourning about for the first 32 days of the Omer, beyond the horrific loss of 24,000 lives, was that essentially the Torah itself, oral Torah specifically, but to the rabbinic mind, Torah exists really through the lifeline of oral Torah. It exists and continues to evolve and remain relevant. And so really what we were mourning was essentially the near-death experience of Torah itself. Through the death, if Rabbi Akiba was the main sage of the generation and he had 24,000 students filling out his academies all over the country and they all died, suffice it to say that Torah, almost an oral Torah in the rabbinic tradition that was being developed at that time, almost went extinct. And so we were mourning that for the first 32 days of the Omer. And on the 33rd day, we are celebrating the fact that Torah didn't go extinct. But those first 32 days, Torah was in danger of extinction because simply people couldn't talk to each other. They couldn't learn together. They couldn't see outside of their own box. And not being able to see outside your own box and engage in real dialogue and open, respectful conversation essentially is the death of Torah. So that brings us through the first 32 days and kind of catches us up to speed with what we're celebrating the end of, was this kind of inability to converse and to connect and to be open and to listen and to respect the other. That was a form of rabbinic Torah that essentially died out with this plague. So what was born? What came after that? So that leads us to the second opinion of what we're commemorating on this day, which is the yahrzeit, the passing of Rabbi Shimon bar Yohai, who's also referred to lovingly as Rashbi, which is an acronym for Rabbi Shimon bar Yohai, who was one of the 5 students that Rabbi Akiba took on after the death of his 24,000 students. In an expression of pure netzach and refusal to give up and perseverance to push on, after losing 24,000 students, Rabbi Akiba didn't throw in the towel. He said, all right, we're going to offer another Zoom class. Who's signing up now? And 5 people signed up. And Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was one of them. And there was some other stellar students, which we will talk about, another one in particular, further on down this winding path that we find ourselves on. So, enter Rashbi, enter Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. So, we're celebrating his yahrzeit. We're not, mourning his passing. We're not tearing our clothes as one often associates with mourning. In fact, we're lighting huge bonfires. We're starting to have haircuts again. People are getting married again. People are jamming out and playing music again. All the things that we weren't doing for the first 32 days where we were mourning a certain kind of death. But now we are experiencing a different kind of death. We are opening up to a different kind of death. And it's the death of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And we're going to learn a little bit now. We're going to explore what that entails and why our response to that passing is different than our response to the other passing. So as I said, Rabbi Akiba takes on 5 students after the death of the 24,000. And it's from those 5 students, essentially, as we discussed last week, that oral Torah continues to survive and thrive. So through those 5 students essentially are responsible for kind of reseeding the soil of the Jewish Imaginarium. And they brought oral Torah through that narrow passage and carried it into the world that we are still inhabiting today. So this was, as we discussed last week, this was during the times of the Roman occupation, persecution, revolution, of the Zealots, failed resistance, military disputes, failed messianic project of Bar Kokhba. And during that time, teaching Torah in public was outlawed. This is during the time period also that we received the gruesome and famous story of Rabbi Akiba's martyrdom. And it was also during this time that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai experiences his own persecution that leads him on his path that we will discuss now. So because of the lack of time, I'm not going to be able to fill out each one of these stories. But I'll make references if you're interested. There's lots of resources online. You can chat with Julie. I'm sure she'll point you in some good directions. But I'm just going to be throwing out a lot of breadcrumbs. So, so Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was having a conversation with a couple other sages during the time, and they were discussing the Roman occupiers and expressing different opinions about them. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai did not express a positive opinion of the Roman occupiers, and somebody in that group reported his words, and in fact, the entire conversation, to the Roman authorities. The Roman authorities were not pleased, and so they started putting up wanted posters, essentially, for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, who hid in the Beit Midrash until the block got too hot. And so they left the Beit Midrash and they retreated to a cave. Very, very Joseph Campbell-y. They read The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and they're like, oh man, what do we do to initiate the hero's journey? We got to find a cave. So they ran to a cave after they were being persecuted. And they spent 12 years in this cave. It says they would bury themselves up to their necks in sand, and they would strip off all their clothes, bury themselves into their necks in sand. And when it became time for them to daven, they would get up, they would put their clothes back on, they would cover their heads, they would daven, and then they would remove their clothes and bury their heads back up in sand again. So not only are they in a cave, but they're kind of like also going through this ritualized kind of burial meditation every day. If a cave isn't womb symbolism enough, they're literally burying themselves in the earth for 12 years. And of course, a freshwater spring magically appears at the mouth of the cave along with a carob tree. And so they fed themselves off of carob and this fresh spring water while burying themselves in this cave for 12 years and meditating and learning Torah. It was during those 12 years that Shimon Bar Yochai achieved illumination and arrived at the teachings that would one day constitute the inner core of the Jewish mystical tradition that was collected in a book called the Zohar. For those who don't know, I'll just say, we'll return to this later, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the, depending on what schools you've been to or who you've studied with, he is either the author of the Zohar or he is the pseudonymic author of the Zohar. So depending on how you hold on that, there's of course much debate. Did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai write the Zohar? Are these his teachings and they were just written down many years later? Or were they attributed to him by a ring of mystical scholars in the Middle Ages in Spain? It's not my concern, really. But within the Jewish imaginary, in the mythic realm, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is either the author of the Zohar, the protagonist of the Zohar, the mascot of the Zohar, and the Kabbalistic teachings included therein. So after those 12 years, Rashbi and his son leave the cave. And upon seeing a farm worker doing his work, they basically completely freak out, to the point that that fire shoots out of their eyes and incinerates the fields. And essentially they couldn't believe, and they kind of exclaim, they say, I don't understand how somebody can occupy their time with olam hazeh, with the shtus of this world at the expense of olam haba. They couldn't fathom how one could busy themselves with the work of this world rather than dedicating themselves 100% completely to contemplation of the eternal, infinite reward of Torah and the spiritual dimension. If you've been with us for the last 5 weeks, this should on some level raise a flag and connect us back to what we diagnosed was a kind of over-spiritualization on the part of Abraham and Yitzhak that had to be rebalanced and reconnected through the traumatic shock of the Akedah. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son are exhibiting the same tendency, which is basically a complete rejection of creation for a zealous commitment to the infinite. Not only should this ring a bell and resonate with the overzealous over-spiritualization of Abraham and Yitzhak, which had to be recalibrated and rebalanced and tiferited through the Akedah, which we explored. But this also should sound familiar to a certain extent with the judgmental nature of Akiva's students, which they had their perspective. They saw somebody else with a different perspective, and they couldn't take it. And in this case, it burns up the field. So up until now, with the story of Shimon Bar Yochai, we're still firmly in the realm of Netzach. And again, just for those who are interested in numbers, we're in the realm of the 12 here. This was 12 years in the cave. Remember, Rabbi Akiba had 12,000 pairs of students. So we're in the realm of the 12. At which point, a voice, a bat kol, a heavenly voice resounded and said, "Is this what you have come back into my world to do? 12 years in the cave and all your spiritual illumination, and you're going to just burn up my world? Go back to your cave." Which they did. And they studied for another 12 months. So we get now the 13, another set of 12 from 12 years, add another 12 onto that, and we get 13 sets of 12. So we kind of evolve past the 12 into the realm of the 13, which we all know from Hebrew numerology as the world, the gematria of Echad, 1, as well as Ahava, love. So we had to move past the 12 to get into the unitive dimension of love. And after that 13th cycle of 12, they were able to finally come out with the rectified vision. This is the actual, I'll just read from the translation of the Gemara, Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, Shabbat 33b and 34a. They went out from their cave, wherever Reb Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's son, wherever he looked, wherever he smote, Reb Shimon healed. And Reb Shimon said, "My son, you and I are sufficient for this world." When the eve of Shabbat arrived, after they had left the cave, they saw a certain old man who was holding 2 bunches of myrtle and running at twilight. They said to him, "Why do you need these?" And he said to them, "L'kavod Shabbos Kodesh," to honor the holy Sabbath. And they asked him, "Wouldn't one suffice?" And he said, "One is for Zachor, remember Shabbat, and one is for Shamor, and guard Shabbat." Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai then said to his son Elazar, the smiter, and he said, "See how dear is a single mitzvah to the people of Israel?" And the Gemara then concludes, and it says, Rabbi Elazar's mind was set at ease. So again, even after the 13th cycle of 12, Rabbi Elazar was still in this hyper-judgmental mind state. He was still in the smiting game. He learned Torah in order to smite those who didn't adhere to the same level or in the same way that he did. But we see here Rashbi has a new vision now. He has a healing vision. And again, we see how is he able to arrive at this and demonstrate this to his son and heal his son's vision, but through the simple act of conversation. "Hey, what are you doing? Let me hear from you. What's your trip?" This is precisely the thing that Rabbi Akiva's students weren't doing. This is what it took. This is what he needed an extra 12 years to learn. 12 years, I'm sure he had lots of mystical Torah, all the trippy ideas and Sefirat this and whoa, what's really going on in the cosmological chain of being and all this stuff. Cool. But he couldn't have a conversation. And so that kind of spirituality literally destroys the world. It destroys creation for the sake of the creator. But if the creator created creation, obviously the creator does not want creation to be destroyed. In fact, we learn at the very beginning of the Torah that we're here to protect creation, to honor creation, to serve creation, to tend creation. We're the servants of creation. We serve the creator by shemoring and zahoring creation. So it took the 13th cycle of 12 for Shimon bar Yochai to actually get this chap, and this is actually the turning point from the first 32 days of the Omer and the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiba who couldn't respect each other, which brought death upon them, and then the life-giving light of the mystical Torah of the Zohar of Shimon bar Yochai that he was able to then initiate into this world. This is the dividing line in between what the rabbinic Torah was like in Rabbi Akiba's academy in the first 32 days of the Omer period, and what needed to happen for oral Torah to actually continue. And this is the thing. It wasn't that they weren't learning out all the sacrifices and the mitzvot and the this and the that. That was there, but they couldn't talk to each other. They couldn't relate to another human being. They were so illuminated, they were blind. So this is what needed to happen for Torah to actually continue. And this is what Rashbi and Rabbi Akiva's next 5 students initiate. So it was after this experience that Rashbi was able to walk amongst the people and spread the mystical teachings that he arrived at during his 13 years of seclusion. These are the teachings that make up the Zohar. So in the same way that the Baal Shem Tov is considered the grandfather of Hasidism, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is considered the grandfather of Zoharic Kabbalism. So many years later, on his deathbed, he gathers his students around him and delivers some of his most profound mystical teachings. And during that period, those teachings are collected in a collection called the Idra Raba, which is a specific section of the Zohar. He exhorts his students, don't be sad on this day that I'm dying. Throw a big party, have a barbecue. My dying, I want to reveal the fact that death is not really what you think it is. It's actually another form of birth. So what things are on the surface is not actually how they are. So here we are celebrating Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's yahrzeit. We're celebrating death. We were mourning death, a certain kind of death. Now we're celebrating death once our eyes have been illuminated to the hidden nature of reality. And we're celebrating also the revelation of this hidden light, the hidden light of the mystical Torah. So what is hidden Torah? Again, we're not going to exhaust this. Lag BaOmer then, this day is essentially, remember, we're moving from Passover to Shavuot, the revelation of the Torah. Aha, but here we are on the 33rd day of the Omer. So this actually is the Shavuot for the Kabbalah. Lag BaOmer is Shavuot for the hidden Torah. Shavuot is Shavuot for the revealed Torah. Lag BaOmer is the Shavuot of the mystical Torah, namely the Zohar. Hidden Torah is thus analogous to the light of the first day, whereas revealed Torah is analogous to the light from the 4th day. So what's the relationship between revealed and hidden Torah? In the Babylonian Talmud in Shabbos, page 138b, the sages say, one day the Torah is going to be forgotten. Aha, but Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai in that conversation says, no, the Torah will never be forgotten. Then, as a juxtaposed text that we want to fold into that, in the Zohar itself, it says that through the study of Zohar, Jews would merit redemption. So the mystical teachings of the Zohar would be what keeps the Torah alive for us through the many years of Galut, exile, and would be the key to unlock our salvation, Geula. So the sages say, Torah is going to be forgotten. Rabbi Shimon bar Yohai, the illuminated one, the hero of the Zohar, the revealer of the hidden Torah, says, no, it might look like it's forgotten. It might look like I'm dying. It might look like the light is going out. There's a greater light. There is a greater light that's going to be revealed. And it's through learning the contours and diving into and connecting to this hidden light, this concealed light, that's actually going to be the thing that gets us through the darkness of exile. I mean that not just in a historical sense, but in an archetypal and a psychological, a spiritual and existential sense. And that learning the hidden Torah is actually going to be what carries us through, what allows us to stay connected to the revealed Torah itself, will allow the revealed Torah to continue to remain relevant and to give forth its fruit all the way until the Messianic era. But, of course, there's something more, I would contest, than just the mystical ideas, that just the attributions of the Sefirot to the characters and the secret coded wisdom and how to unlock the crazy code of the Torah. There's more than just the mystical ideas that are going to keep the Torah alive and interesting that's encoded in the story. We've already alluded to it. There is, of course, a hidden teaching that we have to unpack. This, I would suggest, is the essence of Hod. Remember, we are in the week of Hod, and tonight is the Sefira of Hod, of the Hod of Hod. We are in Hod squared right now. And this is, every week, there's the Chesed of Chesed, okay, there's the Gevura of Gevura, there's the Tiferet of Tiferet, Netzach of Netzach, there's the Yesod of Yesod, there's Malchut of Malchut. But what is it about the Hod of Hod, the energy of Hod, the compacted, condensed, concentrated Hod energy that has to do with the revelation of this concealed Torah and of this hidden light, and what Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was bringing to the world, and in fact, what I would suggest, what the next 5 students of Rabbi Akiba were bringing to the world that the first 24,000 students were incapable of bringing to the world. This all stands and is rooted in and is an expression of Hod. Hod as a sefira is most often translated as acknowledgement, although it can also imply praise, thanksgiving, and even a form of submission. You can, I'm sure, hear the root also in something like Hodu, thanksgiving, Yehuda, Yehudi, the Jewish people are actually is rooted in linguistically in Hod, Yehuda, Yehudim. We are the praisers, the acknowledgers. It is Hod, the sefira of Hod, the energy of Hod, is in many ways predicated and founded upon an awareness of the limitations of the self, which then sensitizes one to the presence of an other, whether that is on a spiritual level, meaning sensitized to the awareness of the presence of an other, meaning God, the ultimate other, or simply relationally with in connection to another human being. Hod is the energy that allows one to tzimtzum themselves, to be in relationship. Remember, chesed is this kind of like avalanche of love. You need gevura to be able to go, there's an other that is a recipient of the love that I want to pour out. Netzach also is very I-oriented. It takes Hod, the quality of Hod to sensitize us to the presence of an other, in order for us to continue to be in rectified relationship with that other. And I think we can all see the role that that's playing in the story of the Omer and of Rabbi Akiba's students and of the hidden Torah as well, which is this is the crux, this is the foundation, this ability to be in relationship. Without that, we destroy the world, we destroy ourselves, we destroy each other. Netzach, victory, says you can do it. You got this. Dig deep. Persevere. Rise up. Hod says you can do what you can do, but there is a power greater than you and influences beyond your control that you are also subject to. You would do well to acknowledge them. And if we're acknowledging them from a spiritual place, i.e., there is Hashem, God, spiritual forces that are involved in the world beyond just you, you might want to give thanks and praise. You might want to acknowledge, I had a success that I achieved through my expression of Netzach. Baruch Hashem, thank you, God. Thank you for allowing me to achieve that success. Thank you for empowering me to achieve that success. Thank you for enabling me to achieve that success. Netzach is necessarily, I can do it. Hod is, I did something, but there's more than just me going on here. Netzach is all confidence, and Hod balances that confidence with humility. We explored last week, as we've been exploring, the different patriarchs that are associated with the Sefirot, and Moshe is associated with Netzach, and Hod is associated with Aharon. We know that Aharon, from tradition teaches us, Aharon famously is the peacemaker. So Aharon is the one who helps people relate, connect, see things through the eyes of an other, reach understanding. That's the role of Aharon, who embodies this quality of Hod. We saw Rabbi Shimon bar Yohai exhibit that same quality in demonstrating through conversation to his son, let's see things through this person's eyes. Maybe it's not what you think. You think it's one way and you got your thing and blah, 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 how could they? Let's ask him. Oh, maybe it's not exactly just how you thought. If you stop for a second and acknowledge the other, respect the other, listen to the other, try to see things from their perspective, walk a mile in their shoes, we might be able literally to save the world, to salvage creation, to save ourselves, to save each other. So Rashbi, as I just alluded to, also brings this kind of shlemut and shalom between people. And I would say, as in the case of Elazar, namely between Torah scholars and lay people. The Zohar is also full of stories of strange characters that on the surface are like nutcases. Crazy old wandering men, foolish children, fools children, like babbling maniacs. On the surface, you just write them off. But through conversation, they actually reveal themselves to be full of wisdom and light. So the Zohar, in a narrative way, continues to demonstrate, hey, stop, ask, talk, connect. You never know what kind of Torah is going to be revealed through somebody that you thought you were just going to write off through your judgment. Additionally, just to sketch out this point a little bit more, very briefly, there was another of Akiva's students who also exemplified the same sensitivity to the sanctity of the other. That's Rebbe Meir. Interestingly, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is credited as being the root of the hidden mystical tradition through the Zohar. And Rabbi Meir, in many ways, is attributed as being the root of the revealed halachic tradition published in the Mishnah. It's actually Yehuda Hanasi, who wrote and redacted the Mishnah, is the son of Rabbi Meir. And in fact, when a halacha is quoted in the Mishnah without attribution, it's understood that's Rebbe Meir. He's literally like, in the way that Shimon Bar Yochai is the voice of the Zohar, Rebbe Meir is understood as being the voice of the Mishnah. So we have, you have the dialectic of written Torah and oral Torah. But then even in oral Torah, you have another dialectic. You have exoteric revealed Torah and esoteric hidden Torah. You have revealed light, fourth day, concealed light, first day. You have Mishnah, you have Zohar, you have Rebbe Meir, and you have Shimon Bar Yochai. But to collapse that dichotomy, I would say that each of them being in the graduating class of 5 students of Rabbi Akiba's Torah Academy post 32 days of the Omer, they share the same root, which is the sensitivity to the sanctity of the other. Just a few quick snippets that demonstrate how Rebbe Meir also exemplifies this. There's a fabulous story. I meant to print it out. Of course, I didn't. Of Rebbe Meir bringing peace between a man and his wife, wherein a wife had gone to shul on Friday night, and she stayed after shul to listen to Rabbi Meir's Torah lecture. It went on longer than usual, and she got home so late the Sabbath lights had already extinguished, and her husband was, oh man, he was not happy. And she said, no, I was at a Torah lecture, I swear. And he said, don't come home until you have spit in that rabbi's face. Oh man. So she goes out. What is she going to do? She's going to go spit in Rabbi Meir's face? Are you kidding me? She can't do this. So she's got a big problem. She goes, she kind of hems and haws. Somehow, I forget the details. I don't have that kind of mind to remember all these details. But somehow, Rabbi Meir hears of her problem. And as she approaches, he says, I have something in my eye. I need somebody to spit in my eye. I need some lubrication for my eye. Can you spit in my eye 7 times? She can't believe her luck, so she goes right up to Rabbi Meir and she says, 7 times, right in his face. So now she can go home. And she leaves, and his students are aghast. What? How can you do this? How can you allow yourself, this great Torah sage, to be humiliated? She just spit in your face in public. How could you allow that to happen? And he said, you know what? For the sake of bringing peace between a husband and wife, between loving partners, God himself, God herself, God ourself, allows their name to be erased in the Sota waters. If God can do it, I can do it. So I can have my name erased. I can have my ego shrunk. I can be publicly humiliated in order to bring peace between 2 loving companions. Amazing. So Aharon, right? It's such Aharon energy. Bringing peace between people and sacrificing oneself in order to bring peace between 2 loving partners. And the other story I would bring that really, in my opinion, is just so rich, this could be a whole series of classes on itself, is the relationship between Rabbi Meir and one of his other teachers, who's a famous heretic named Elisha ben Abuya, who in the rabbinic tradition actually receives the name Acher, other, after he performs his apostasy, publicly, his heresy. And yet Rabbi Meir continues to learn with him, continues to interact with him, continues to be his friend, and continues to learn from him. There's a phenomenal story that everybody's in shul, and Elisha ben Abuya rides by on a horse, publicly flouting the laws of the Sabbath. Rabbi Meir says, okay, cool, later guys, later davening, I hope you have a minyan. I'm going to go hang with the heretic. And so he accompanies Elisha ben Abuya, who's riding through town on the Sabbath, and they talk Torah and they talk this, and tries to, when are you coming back, man? What are you doing? All this stuff. And he also publicly, he's learning with him, he's talking with him, he's hanging out. They're old friends. They're great learning partners. And interestingly enough, at a certain point in their journey, it's Elisha ben Abuya who points out to Rabbi Meir, hey, you know what? I think we've reached the Shabbos boundary. You can't go any further. So interestingly enough, it's the heretic who's so in touch with the Torah that he's been counting their steps. And Rabbi Meir, the great sage, who's so enwrapped in their conversation, he's completely forgotten where he is, and he's ceased to be counting his steps and to become aware of the halachic boundaries. So the heretic reminds the halachic authority of the boundaries that he himself does not want to cross. And at the end of the story, through the Gemara, there in Hagiga 15a and b in the Babylonian Talmud, there's the end of their story essentially is that Elisha ben Abuya dies, and one version of the story is Rabbi Meir gets him to repent on his deathbed. Of course, there's another version of the story that follows directly after, and it says that no, he didn't. In fact, he was buried, and then a pillar of fire basically comes down and kind of smites his grave, the fires of Gehinnom. And Rabbi Meir basically tries to speak on his behalf, on Elisha ben Abuya's behalf in the spiritual realms, and says, you know, God, come on, you got to accept this guy, take him to Gehinnom, take him to the fires of Gehinnom so his soul can be purified and he can enter back into Gan Eden. And then there's this amazing quote. Look at the self-sacrifice for the sake of an other, a heretic, right? We go from Akiba, his students, these are Torah scholars. They're like the elite halachic in the elite halachic academy. They couldn't even get along with each other. Then you have the story of Rashbi leaving the cave and bringing peace between his son Elazar and the farmer, layperson, bringing the myrtle branches. So, okay, fine. So between the Torah scholars and the lay people, let's bring some shlemut, right? Now we have Rebbe Meir bringing the sensitivity to the heretics, even the heretics. It goes beyond the simple people. Now we get this whole thing brought to the heretics, and Rabbi Meir says, if God is not willing to redeem you, Elisha ben Abuya, then I, Rabbi Meir, will redeem you. As the Lord lives, lie down until morning, from the book of Ruth. And the fire, it says in the Gemara, then the fires ceased from his grave. Only when another human being said, even if God won't do it, even if God won't treat you with compassion, even if God won't let you in, I will. I'll treat you with compassion. I'll see your soul through. I'll accompany you on that path. And God's like, psh. And then the fires vanished from the grave. He took it upon himself. It reminds me of a wonderful, wonderful Hasidic story where a Hasid goes, I forget which Rebbe, maybe it seems probably like Rebbe Reb Zusha's story or something like this, but a I forget who the Rebbe was, but one of his students comes and he says, you say we're supposed to find God in everything. We're supposed to find divinity, the Nakuda Tova, the good point in everything. Well, explain to me this. What's the good point of a heretic? Where's God in a heretic? I don't get it. Explain to me that. And he said, the answer was, everything is up to God, and that's how you should live your life, except for one time. You should be a complete heretic. When somebody comes and knocks on your door asking for help, then you should be a complete heretic and say, it's completely up to me. I need to help this person. You don't turn them away and say, who am I to help you? God will help you. At that moment, you must be a heretic and say, it really is up to me. I'm going to help this person. I see that reflected in Rebbe Meir's exclamation on the behalf of his friend and teacher, the great heretic. If God won't redeem you, I'll do it. Such self-sacrifice for the sanctity of the other. Unbelievable. This is the hidden Torah. And in fact, Rebbe Meir is the one who says in Pirkei Avot, do not look at the flask, but what is in it. This is the Ikar. This is the point. This is the foundation of hidden Torah. Things are not what they are on the surface. You have to look deeper. This then gets applied. The Zohar applies this way of thinking and engaging the world to the Torah, to the text of the Torah itself. It says, look, it's not just these simple stories and these simple utterances. There's a whole world of spiritual wisdom and illumination going on beneath the surface of this. But of course, the most important point, it's not enough to just apply that to the text of the Torah. It's not enough to say, it's not just what's on the surface of the Torah. We have to look deeper. We have to apply it to reality itself. Because we know that the Torah, we learn in Midrash Raba that the Torah is the blueprint of reality. So if Torah is the blueprint of creation, the blueprint of reality, then if we're going to apply that esoteric read and spend the time to dig beneath the surface and say, I know there's something good in here. I know there's light in here. Man, this stuff is messed up, but I know there's light. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to suspend my disbelief, and I'm going to continue digging until I find that seed of light, that Or Zarua, to the Torah. If we apply it to the text of the Torah, if we don't then take that view and apply it to the world and apply it to each other, and even apply it to ourselves, then it doesn't matter. And that is beyond the mystical, metaphysical teachings of the Zohar. It's the relational posture that Rabbi Shimon bar Yohai and Rabbi Meir, that Rabbi Akiba is finally able to imbue into his students, into those 5 precious students. That's what enabled the Torah to continue. That's what enabled us to continue. That's what enabled the world to continue. Akiva's students were all netzach in their love for their fellow. They tried to force their viewpoint on each other. They tried to win. They tried to win that conversation. They were netzach sheba netzach. Lag BaOmer, tonight, the yahrzeit of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, the Shavuot of the hidden Torah, is Hod Sheba Hod, the ultimate energy of the acknowledgement of the other with whom you are communicating. This was the turning point and the end of the plague of self-righteous condescension. Spiritualized self-righteous condescension. Nothing more dangerous. The inability to speak with one another is the death of Torah. This is what we were celebrating. The ability to be in relationship with others who may see or be different than we are. The mystical Torah, which sees the unity behind all apparent multiplicity, allows for a multitude, myriad viewpoints of the same truth or phenomenon. This is the ability to acknowledge that the truth is so much bigger and deeper and more complex and simple than any one of us can contain on our own. It is only when all of our perspectives and passions are added up all together that we will get a glimpse of the totality of the truth of the Torah that transcends each of our individual viewpoints, no matter how well reasoned. This is the light of the hidden Torah, which reveals things as they truly are, which are not always as they seem. This is how we can celebrate the death of Rabbi Shimon bar Yohai, because according to this viewpoint, death is not the end of life, but a birth into another phase and another dimension. So, as is our custom, we will now count the day. We will make this day count. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kideshanu b'mitzvotav v'tivanu al Sefirat HaOmer. Hayom shlosha u'shloshim yom shehem arba'a shavuot v'chamisha yamim la'omer. Hod, Sheba Hod. Peace, peace, peace. From where you're coming from to where you're going to where you're at. May we all walk in peace. May we all get beyond the 12 and get into the 13th cycle of 12 to bring in the echad, the oneness, and the ahava, so that we can listen to each other and respect each other and truly love each other, which would require us to not just see the other as the repository of our version of truth, but a wellspring of another facet of the infinite diamond of one. Peace.